Some students sneak into concerts. Others sneak into movies. Elijah Rivera snuck into a Harvard math lecture. Not because he meant to. At least not at first. He was just supposed to be waiting in the hallway for his father, who worked nights as a custodian in the engineering building. But when the heavy wooden door to Lecture Hall C swung open and a tide of voices spilled into the corridor animated, electric, curious Elijah's instinct to stay put surrendered to something more powerful. Curiosity. He slipped inside without a sound. Small and unnoticed. A shadow against the high oak-paneled walls. No one turned to look. He wore a hoodie 2 sizes too large. Sleeves swallowing his hands. Sneakers duct-taped at the toes. But his eyes' brilliant silver pools that didn't blink much moved like they were chasing something invisible across the room. At the lectern stood Professor Malcolm Atherton. A name whispered with reverence in mathematical circles from Cambridge to Caltech. He was tall, skeletal, and carried himself with the cool detachment of someone who had seen too many geniuses try and fail. Word was, he'd once rejected a Fields Medal because he didn't like the idea of having to smile for photographs. Tonight, he wore a blazer the color of a storm cloud and held a piece of chalk like it was a blade. This equation, he said, wrapping it on the board with surgical precision, has confounded every doctoral candidate I've thrown it at this semester. If you came here looking for easy victories, you're in the wrong building. The class chuckled nervously. Elijah didn't. He was already staring at the chalkboard, where a sprawl of interlocking variables curved and spiraled like a nest of vipers. It was madness to most. A Mobius strip of nested loops. Conditionals wrapped inside constraint matrices. And Greek letters that twisted in impossible configurations. But Elijah didn't see chaos. He saw rhythm. He mouthed the symbols under his breath, like lyrics to a song only he could hear. And slowly, the structure began to rise in his mind, not an answer, but a framework, a scaffolding that suggested meaning. Without hesitation, he pulled a chewed-up pencil from his hoodie pocket, the kind of mechanical pencil you find between subway seats, and began sketching. Not solving. Mapping. Reorienting. He rearranged elements the way a child rearranges toy bricks. Carefully. Deliberately. Beside him, a graduate student named Clara glanced over and froze. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Elijah didn't look up. "I think there's a recursive interval that folds the outer constraint," he murmured. "If you refactor the prime timing inputs, it starts to simplify." Clara blinked. "What?" "I mean, maybe." She stared at the paper, then at the board, then raised her hand slowly. "Yes?" Atherton said, irritation creeping into his voice. "Professor, I think the kid in the front row found something." "The what?" Atherton's gaze dropped like a guillotine. He saw Elijah, saw the hoodie, the taped shoes, the tiny figure scribbling furiously. He descended the lecture steps in silence until he stood over the boy, casting a shadow across the notebook. Elijah didn't flinch. Atherton took the paper without a word and scanned it. The room held its breath. Then, after a full minute, he said one word. "Interesting." Elijah cleared his throat. "I wasn't trying to interrupt. I just like numbers." Atherton studied him. "What's your name?" "Elijah." "That's not what I asked." Elijah hesitated. "I'm nobody. My dad works here." More silence. Then Atherton turned back to the board and made a single, precise correction. And another. When he was finished, the equation no longer looked the same. "This," he said, holding up Elijah's paper, "isn't a solution, but it's dangerously close to being one. What are you doing tomorrow at 5 p.m.? I have dinner with my dad. Bring him. My office. Room 712. Don't be late." He walked away. The class erupted into whispers. Elijah just stared at the board, as if it were a place he had always known but never dared to walk through. That night, Elijah didn't mention the incident. His father, Luis, mopped the same hallway he'd mopped for 7 years. Oblivious. When they got back to their apartment above a laundromat on Tremont Street, Elijah did something different. He didn't turn on the TV. He opened a battered math textbook he'd pulled from a free box in the Cambridge library weeks ago. He read until his eyes burned. And then, just before sleep took him, he whispered something into the dark. I want to understand the world the way numbers do. At 4:57 p.m. The next day, Elijah stood outside Professor Atherton's office. Luis was beside him in a collared shirt still faintly stained with bleach. You sure this isn't a mistake? Me, Joe? I just wrote something. That's all. Harvard didn't schedule office meetings over doodles. But the door opened. You're early. Atherton said. I like early. Elijah replied. Good. Come in. The office was austere. One desk, 3 chairs, and a whiteboard that looked like the night sky had spilled across it. Equations instead of constellations. They sat. Luis looked awkward. Like the furniture might accuse him of trespassing. If Elijah's in trouble. He's not, Atherton said sharply. He turned to the boy. Tell me what you saw last night. The equation? Yes. The one that stumped every grad student. How did you isolate the recursive prime loop? Elijah shrugged. It sounded wrong. Sounded? Like a song with a note in the wrong place. You think math is music? Sometimes. They both repeat. But not the same way. Atherton sat back. Luis looked at his son like he was seeing him for the first time. Where did you learn this? Nowhere. Just books. Sometimes I watch people solving problems on YouTube. And sometimes I sneak into classrooms. And you just absorb it? I think about it a lot. Even when I sleep. There was a long pause. Come here. Elijah approached the board. Atherton drew a simpler equation. Solve for x. Elijah studied it, then picked up a blue marker. He worked slowly, methodically, made one mistake, caught it, annotated the correction, negative root collapses in real set. Atherton read the note. Then he said, Elijah, do you want to learn? I already do. Not like this. I mean really learn. In a classroom. With mentorship. With access. Luis cleared his throat. We can't afford. It wouldn't cost anything. There's a private program. No fees. But the entry test is brutal. If he fails, there's no second chance. I'm not afraid of failing, Elijah said softly. Atherton smiled. Good. Then let's make the world uncomfortable. That night, Elijah didn't sleep. Not from fear. From purpose. He worked through the problems Atherton gave him with a flashlight under the sheets. On the morning of the test, he walked into room 417, holding only his pencil and a notebook filled with scribbles and underlined phrases, assumption, pattern, counterpoint. The proctor raised an eyebrow. You're early. I like early. 3 hours. No calculators. No help. Elijah didn't start at the top. He began at the second to last line. Found the recursion. Broke the loop. Solved backwards. Then forwards. Then sideways. Down the hall. Behind a two-way mirror. Atherton stood silently. Next to him, Dean Lenora Gates watched. He's 10. She said. Yes. This is madness. No. This is spark. Our job is to find the spark before the world snuffs it out. At 11:58. Elijah dropped his pencil. His paper wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Breathing. Thought made visible. The proctor picked it up. Good luck. Elijah didn't respond. That night, he sat on the roof above the laundromat, watching Harvard's towers gleam in the distance. Then his phone buzzed. You didn't just pass. You outscored every applicant. Welcome to the other side of the equation. Elijah smiled. He wasn't just near the door now. He was inside. Due to platform constraints? The story continues in the following message. Harvard didn't roll out red carpets for 10-year-olds. No fanfare. No orientation tour. Just a laminated ID and a schedule that made no exceptions for prodigies. Elijah walked the halls like a ghost misplaced by time. The other students all. Caffeinated. Busy barely noticed him. When they did, it was usually because of his shoes. He heard the whispers. Is that the janitor's kid? Seriously, what's he doing here? He solved what? They didn't believe it. Not really. His first class was Advanced Mathematical Structures with Dr. Fiona Gray, a sharp-edged academic who didn't care about rumors. When Elijah entered, she didn't ask his name. You're late? She said. I'm early by 3 minutes. Then use them. She snapped, scribbling an equation across the board. Elijah read it. Head tilted. Then he stepped forward and solved it not with flair, but with clarity, one symbol at a time. When he finished, the board glowed with elegant truth. There's a shorter method, he said. But I didn't want to skip steps. Dr. Gray stared, then nodded. The students around him whispered again, but this time, not with mockery, with uncertainty. At lunch, he didn't go to the dining hall. He wasn't on a meal plan. Instead, he sat under a tree, eating a peanut butter sandwich crushed in wax paper. A girl sat beside him without asking. I'm Anna, she said. You're Elijah. He blinked. Hi. How old are you? 10. No way. He pulled out his student ID. She squinted. No way. Are you going to ask if I'm a freak now? Anna frowned. Why would I do that? That's what people usually ask. Or say. Or whisper. You don't seem like you care. I do, he said quietly. I just haven't figured out how to show it. That night, he found himself back in room 214, the same lecture hall where it all began. He stood at the board, not solving, just thinking. Atherton walked in. Rough day? They laugh sometimes. Why? My shoes. My age. My face. Don't change the shoes. Atherton said. Change the story. I think I want to teach someday. Elijah whispered. Why? Because most teachers only teach the loud kids. I want to teach the quiet ones too. Atherton smiled. There's a seminar next week. Be there. I'm not enrolled. I didn't ask if you were. 2 days later, Elijah attended the seminar on problem solving under constraints. He stood at the back, notebook open. Halfway through, he raised his hand. Laughter. Snickers. Atherton nodded. Elijah? I think the error isn't in the math, he said. It's in the assumptions. We're preserving every node out of habit. But if we treat the gaps as variables, not flaws, the whole model shifts. Show us. He did, and the room changed. Later that week, a photograph appeared on the student bulletin board, a picture of the whiteboard in room 214, covered in chalk, taped with a sticky note. I don't need you to believe the answer. I need you to believe I walked the road. Caption, this is what genius looks like. Not perfect, just real. By noon, it had 3,000 views. By night, it had Dean Gates' attention. The complaint that had been filed anonymously accusing Elijah of cheating was dropped. Official verdict, no misconduct. All work original. Case closed. But something deeper shifted. The laughter stopped. Not because he had silenced them, but because they had finally listened. From that point on, when Elijah entered a room, they didn't look down at him. They looked to him. It wasn't reverence. It was recognition. He solved problem 47, then 48, then tackled the ones no one talked about anymore, the ones professors had labeled elegant failures. And one day, while browsing the archives, Elijah found the legend, Problem 6, a paradox of topological time states left unresolved for 32 years. He read the notes, traced the loops, and whispered, they don't meet. They fold. 3 days later, his walls at home were covered in graphs, string, and taped paper. On the third night, hands trembling, he finished it, wrote the proof in silence, then slid it, and signed. Under Atherton's door. By morning, the department had called an emergency review. When Elijah stepped into the boardroom, 5 professors sat waiting. Walk us through it. One said. He did. Not quickly. Not boastfully, just precisely, one idea at a time, until the impossible cracked open. Dean Gates stood. In 30 years, I've never seen a solution turn into something that feels like art. News traveled. Problem 6, solved. B. Rivera. March 17th. 10:02 a.m. There was no party. But the next time Elijah sat in class, nobody looked at his shoes. They listened. Maya messaged him, "You didn't solve it to impress anyone. You solved it because you couldn't not try." He replied, "Even closed doors make noise when you knock loud enough." An invitation arrived, TEDx Cambridge. 12 minutes. Global audience. Elijah walked on stage in the same hoodie from his first day. "When I was 7, he said, I solved a problem on a napkin while waiting for my dad to clean a diner bathroom. I didn't know it was calculus. I just thought it looked wrong." He paused. Turns out, a lot of the world looks wrong when you're not standing in the right place to see it. They called him a prodigy. "I'm not," Elijah said. "I'm just someone who kept asking questions even when no one answered." He turned and wrote 5 words on the board. "What else are we missing?" That night, the video hit 1 million views. Elijah didn't check. He was busy, back in room 214, helping a student named Tarek understand recursive structures. Because for him, the real equation was recognition plus service equals purpose. On Thursday nights, the light in room 214 stayed on late. Students trickled in, some lost, some silent, some almost ready to give up. Elijah stood at the board with the same duct-taped chalk and said, "Recursion isn't about repetition. It's about return. It's about learning something new each time you come back." At 2:06 a.m., a girl named Sophia raised her hand. I think I see it now." She approached the board and made a correction Elijah hadn't even seen. "That's brilliant," he said. "Really? I missed it." Her eyes sparkled not with pride, but with recognition. Later that morning, Elijah left a note on the chalkboard. "Midnight Math Society, Session 1 complete. Come as you are." He didn't lock the door. Years passed. Elijah stayed, then left, then returned. He earned degrees he never hung, published work he never promoted, rejected titles that felt too big. But room 214? It always had light, because Elijah remembered what it felt like to be unseen. And he vowed to leave the door open for the next kid who didn't look like they belonged but thought in ways the world hadn't yet learned to see. The end.